we do have to talk about something of a little bit darker subject matter, and that is COVID-19, the pandemic that has affected everybody on this planet. And I wanted to start this segment with a magazine article I read recently, and the title of that article, which is from New York Magazine: Professional Sports Are Learning to Live with COVID. We're next. I think that says it all. As Omicron is surging, it's becoming much more of a problem than it even was before. Rates went down for a little bit. Now they're going up in terms of infections and hospitalizations, all these really bad things. And sports have been trying their best to adjust or amend what's necessary, with some success and some failure. The NHL shut down recently. They're actually resuming play tonight. That should be interesting to see how that goes as a case study. But other leagues like the NFL have taken a more laissez-faire approach, not testing vaccinated players regularly unless they're symptomatic or have been in close contact to someone that's contracted the virus. The NBA taking a similar approach, or quasi-similar approaches. Now they have hardship contracts for teams that have been particularly hit hard by the virus, allowing play to continue amidst the pandemic. I just wonder if there's ever going to be a time in this pandemic in sports where we decide this is what needs to be done and there's a standard precedent that's set. It doesn't feel like that's happened yet. Now, whether that's taking a break and shutting down for a period of time, or playing through and figuring out how to do that smartly and safely, I don't know. That's a discussion we can have. I'm hoping we will have that. But right now, it does not seem like there's much consistency throughout the world of sports. And that extends also to college athletics as well, not just the pros. There's been many postponements, things of that nature that have happened and really hit that area of athletics hard.
Definitely, Colin. I got to start with this, though. If we want to see change, it's going to have to come from these much higher ups, like the NFL and the NBA, and then there are people that are much higher and much greater than them. But when you see what the NFL and the NBA, specifically those two leagues, what they're doing, it shows you that they're ready to adapt. They want to adapt. They want to show people that, the world is okay. We can move forward with coronavirus. It's always going to be here, and we have to work around it. If we want to continue to do what we love, we need to adapt.
Absolutely. Adaptation's been necessary with this virus since day one. I am a little bit concerned of how we're going about it as a society, as people who cover sports, as the sports world specifically is going about this, because it feels very much like we're surrendering to the virus. I don't want to say that because I know it sounds horrible, but it might be the truth. I mean, the CDC has now lessened quarantine time to 5 days, which I know that people are saying that Omicron is less dangerous than other variants such as Delta, but it makes me wonder what this was all for when we did shut down in March of 2020, when the world of sports did stop. I don't want to be a pessimist or someone that's not looking on the bright side of adaptation. Let's do this and get through this. But if we were just going to do this to begin with and try and work around it, then why did we stop? And also, has the virus changed that much to where someone that might not be vaccinated won't be gravely ill or injured or, God forbid, killed because of it? I just have a hard time accepting that personally. I don't know how you feel about this one.
See, Colin, all of the questions that you just rose, excuse me, that's the problem with this whole situation. It's just too confusing. Nobody knows the right answer. We haven't been able to figure it out. But as a society, we have to just keep going. And society loves sports. So we could bring back something that society loves. It gets people going. It gets people involved again, The NBA, they're cutting down the quarantine day or isolation day to from 10 to 6. NFL going from 10 to 5, not testing asymptomatic people. But let me ask you, though, if you don't have symptoms, though, are you going to get a test? That's the real thing. Is it that necessary to have a test when you don't feel sick? That's just my question and my opinion on it. I don't see the reasoning behind testing these guys every single day, maybe even twice a day, if they're not sick, if they're healthy.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people are wondering. I'm not the most well-read person, of course, on asymptomatic spread or anything like that. It's not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. But just to play devil's advocate with you here, if you're playing a close contact sport like football and asymptomatic spread is still prevalent, I think as the opposing player who's not sick or has not contracted anything, I'd like the other guy to get tested. I mean, if he's going to tackle me into the 5-yard line and I might get COVID from this individual, or God forbid, give COVID to someone close to me that might be older or immunocompromised, then yeah, then I think maybe you should get tested. And you might want to see who's who on the field, because a lot of this really comes down to what is society's duty towards other people. This is how I've been thinking about this, Liz. I think at first everyone saw coronavirus and said, I don't want to get this because it's a danger to my health. Then more literature came out about what the virus was, and it became, you should wear a mask, not necessarily because you're scared you're going to get sick, but you don't want to give it to somebody else that might not be as fortunate to have as good a health as you. I just question whether or not sports is making a good example of that point by lessening all of these restrictions. I think the safer you are, the better. This might sound radical to you, but I was all for the NHL shutting it down when they did. Once cases went berserk like they did and everyone's getting sick and you're in protocol, yeah, at that point, shut it down and let's come back. I actually think they came back too early. I would have shut down until New Year's Day and shut it down maybe even a little quicker than they did. They had started that shutdown, I believe it was December 23rd, and they still had a game to be played that night between the Capitals and the Flyers. I was very encouraged by the fact that they were willing to do so, but I wondered two things at the time. Did they do it early enough? And is this really going to help given the amount of time that the virus can live in your body? I think the smarter that the world of sports is in terms of how they handle this, the smarter society will be in their personal choices. Because look, when you have guys like Kyrie Irving that say they don't want to take the vaccine, that gets into people's craws. I know we all like to think that we're impenetrable from other people's opinions sometimes, but that's just not the case. There's many impressionable people out there, myself included. If I heard Dr. Fauci or somebody else that I trusted on the virus say something, I'd be inclined to think a little bit differently. And for some people, celebrities and athletes have that sort of pull. I think this is something that's definitely worth talking about above all else, because, you know, while people might not meet a consensus, it's important to have these discussions and to really see where everyone's head's at with something like this.
Yeah, definitely. All these athletes and celebrities, you know, they're using their platforms as they always have been. You know, it's COVID. It's a very hot and sensitive topic. To backtrack onto the NHL cancellation, I can't even say cancellation, just a pause, if you may. To be honest with you, Colin, I wasn't really for it. You know, I think that since they did it and they came back as soon as they did, I'm happy they did that. Just because I think you really need the example of we can do this. We're not going to let COVID beat us. I think when you say surrender, we surrender to COVID when we pause our sports, when we stop our world. That's when we surrender to COVID. We have to show we have a vaccine, we have 2 shots, we have a booster. We have to show that we are bigger than a virus and continue to go out into the world and just give back and contribute. That, you know, society can keep rolling, the world can keep spinning, sports can keep being played, you know. So I wasn't too happy about the pause, but, you know, it is what it is. It's over now. I'm happy the NBA and Adam Silver, actually, to quote him, he didn't pause because he said we have to learn to live with coronavirus. And he couldn't be any more true. We do have to learn to live with this thing because it's going to be around forever. And I think bringing sports back and just watching the leagues, just, you know, you see all the updates. This guy went down with COVID. This guy went down with COVID. And then the guys that they bring in, specifically, we can go into depth into the 10-day contracts in the NBA. Look at all the guys that are getting opportunities and they're stepping up and they're playing good basketball and they're able to put a product onto the field and into people's living rooms on television. So I think it's a good thing that the NBA and the NFL have found ways to continue to keep going. I totally respect and understand your concerns, but I'm ready for what they're doing and what the other leagues expect from the players. And let's just keep moving forward. Let's keep marching ahead.
Absolutely. I think, you make some valid points there, and ones that I definitely likewise respect and consider important in the grand scheme of COVID and how we choose to go about this. Because at the end of the day, you are right, to one extent or another, we do have to adapt in terms of how we handle it. I think our difference in opinion is not so much about, our willingness to fight COVID, just how we go about it. I think we differ in strategy, not in terms of end goal. And I think that's something that really politicians and other people could learn a lesson from, is that you might not agree with the other guy on how you go about doing something, but you're all trying to achieve the same thing at the end of the day. And, these type of discussions are really important. And I think sports is going to be a prime example of really how the rest of us should handle it. I think that article was spot on. Sports are learning to live with this. We're next. The question is, how are we going to do so? Does it take a more conservative approach in terms of maybe waiting it out? Or does it take a more forward thinking and, a little bit more progressive approach in terms of you're going to march through no matter what here and see what happens and hope that the vaccines that people do have are going to fight back in that sense of the word. So a lot to see here. Hopefully, I'm praying that Omicron does slow down, hurting a lot of people as we get into the winter months here. Let's all hope for the best and hope that sports is not affected too much more.